Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session on Cancer Genomics and the United Against Prostate Cancer project. I'm Annette Breen. I'm one of the lead nurses with the East GMSA. And today we've got some fantastic speakers. Recording the session for people who can't join or would like to come back to this later. So the speakers we've got María, Echevarría, Gutiérrez. I don't know how that pronunciation was.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
Genetic counsellor from University Hospitals Leicester NHS Trust, and she's been working on the United Against Prostate Cancer project. Got Joe Lowry, who's our regional programme manager from the East Genomic Medicine Service Alliance. And we've got the wonderful Mr. Eddie Blair, who's many things: entrepreneurial scientist, cyclist, walker, golfer, gym goer and more, and he lives with prostate cancer. And we just wanted to start this session off with a short clip for the memory of, it's Andy who's done a little video clip for us, but very, very sadly Andy has now passed away. So we wanted to dedicate this session to the memory of Andy and to all the guys out there who are living with prostate cancer. So Ian, would you like to, and if I could ask you all to go on mute. And then, sorry, I didn't say this either. Sorry, it's my cold. If you've got questions during the presentations, just raise your hand or put a question in the chat and we'll come to it. And we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end as well. So Ian, over to you.
My message to men is get tested. I wish I had. To leave such a beautiful family breaks my heart. But at least I can do something for them, hopefully. What better legacy than giving the gift of life?
We're going to be talking today to Andy about his diagnosis of prostate cancer and the genetic tests that were carried out on his tumour, but also then on his blood, to try and understand the cause of his prostate tumour and to work out whether his family could potentially be at increased risk of developing either breast, ovarian or prostate cancer in the future.
It was 4 years ago, more or less to the day, wasn't it, Dawn, that I got my prognosis, and it was ridiculous because I was such a fit guy. I collapsed after doing a 10-mile run. Now that was water off a duck's back to me at the time. I'd done the Leicester Marathon in pouring rain a matter of weeks before, and I always used to think, well, I'm such a fit guy, and then I just collapsed and they wheeled me down here. Well, Dawn brought me down, and I woke up the next morning. They took me for a scan, and then they came around in the afternoon and said, you've got a serious problem. You've got prostate cancer. It's spread and it's gone into the bone, so there's no cures. And I'm sat there thinking, you what? Yesterday I was going out for a run, so it was a real shell shock. It came out of a clear blue sky. I mean, when I was at Lowry, they said to me, did you have any symptoms? Did you have any blood in your urine? No. I said to them, I think there was the odd time at the city when you could hear the crowd starting to get excited when you thought, I'm taking a long time to have a wee, but then you're off again. But there was nothing obvious, was there, Dawn? for me, and I believe it's going to be important for my family. With four sons, I think there's a pretty strong chance that it's going to be involved somewhere, and that could save their lives. That could stop them going through the awful times I'd have struggled to get through without the help of Dawn. You know, the thought that I'm not going to see them, my grandchildren, grow into the people I think they could become, I find very hard to cope with. But if, on the positive side,
They are protected now.
I can protect them.
You've given the ultimate gift of
Yeah,
protection.
I've given the gift of life, like my brother's taking the mickey at me.
Yeah.
But he does say every so often, take a bit of credit, Andy.
Yeah.
It's my message to men is get tested. I wish I had, and I can't work out why I didn't. You've got to go and get the tests and find out whether you've got the gene. You've got to. You owe it, if you've got kids, to them. You've got to understand, to make sense of everything. It's a bloody horrible thing. I know none of us are like bad news, but it perhaps won't be bad news. But if it is, at least you're in with a fighting chance. If you understand what's going on, that's half the battle in everything. Harriet was brilliant, and she's the one that sent me to you, and you've been brilliant. You listened to me rabbit about football and all sorts of things, but you've also come in with the reason that I got it, which has been a real bugbear to me. You've made sense of what's going on with my family, and of some ways that my gorgeous grandkids and my wonderful sons, that I can perhaps help them. What better legacy than giving the gift of life?
Testing of tumours is really rather new, and we hope that we'll be able to in the future develop better treatments for individuals affected with a number of different types of tumour. Prostate tumour is the start, but we hope to be able to offer additional tests on a number of different types of tumour in the future, not only here at University Hospitals of Leicester, but throughout the whole region. If we identify a gene change, and we have in Andy's tumour, we often go back to families to talk to them about whether they'd like to find out if that gene change has been inherited. And then from there, be able to talk to them about their family members to see if they'd like to come forward via referral to from their general practitioner to talk about the pros and cons of finding out if a gene change is present and running in a family.
That's very powerful and, very sad. But Andy's left a great legacy behind. And in the short film clip there, we can see that there were two types of genetic testing talked about. There was genetic testing to find out if family members might have inherited a gene change. And then there was genomic testing on the tumour to find out any treatment options. So I'm going to hand over to Maria now, who's going to talk to us about cancer clinical genetics and introduce Cancer Genomics as well. So Maria, over to you. And of course, any questions throughout the presentations, please pop your hand up.
Thank you very much, Annette. And thank you for showing this video and this bit that you were saying about both type of testing on tumor testing and on what germline testing is called. We will also discuss today. I'm gonna talk a little bit about cancer genetics. Some of you may already know about this information, but hopefully everyone can gather at least one helpful bit from it. I'm also going to talk about how and when to refer patients to our service, different types of genetic testing that are available, and also a little bit about the last updates on genetic testing for prostate cancer. But before any of that, I would like to introduce our team. I am based at the Leicester Royal Infirmary, but really our team is split into two. We are based at the Leicester Royal Infirmary, but also the Northampton Hospital. And we cover a really wide area when it comes to clinics and patients, as we see patients from Leicester, Northampton, Kettering and Rutland areas. And our department is really also divided into 3 different teams. We have the family history team, which gathers information on family, but also on our patient, and organizes this information prior to our appointment and present it to the clinicians. But we also have the admin team, who basically coordinates all the department and also help arrange and coordinate appointments and any patients concerned. And when it comes to the clinical team, we are mainly composed by genetic counselors and also SCP trainees and genetic consultants, which we also have some registrars. And when it comes to the clinical team, we have 3 different teams. We have the rare diseases or general genetics team. We also have a prenatal team and also the cancer team. But several members of our service, they work, if not in 1 or 2, in all 3 of the different services. And I included some details on our different teams and our telephone number. So if you ever want to get in touch with us, we'd be more than happy to help you with any queries you may have. Right. So I am a genetic counselor, and many of my patients, they haven't heard about genetic counseling before, even though it's increasingly common in clinical practice now. And when it comes to our different responsibilities, we have a wide range of responsibilities, but it's really individualized to the patient, as every patient has a different type of need, and we adjust to what the patient needs in the appointment. But sometimes we assess the risk of a patient to develop certain type of condition, or for example, cancer, or the risk that a family member can have of inheriting this risk to develop cancer. We also help families to understand what's going on within the family and assess them whether there's any possibility, as for example, many people are interested in genetic testing, see whether genetic testing is available for us, see what type of genetic testing is better for them, and what type of implication can have on them and on other family members. And again, our appointments are really individualized. We understand that every patient can have different type of needs, and for that we really take into account the different cultures, values, or religious beliefs that the patient might have in order to be able to provide a sensitive care for that patient. Really, when it comes to genetic testing, for us, it's very important that the patient can make this decision on genetic testing once they know what this genetic testing can mean, what the different implications can have. So the person is the most sure about the genetic testing that they can be. And I like to think about genetic testing, about genetic counseling, as a process rather than one appointment, because many of our patients, they need ongoing care, maybe different appointments or maybe different resources. So it's an ongoing conversation, and we would like to provide not only the patient but our families with the support they need in our appointments. We hear more and more about genetics when it comes to medicine, and this is because our DNA and our health, the relationship is immediate, and this relation is important when it comes to different applications in medicine. I think the most famous one, or the one that we've heard more, is to confirm the diagnosis of a disease. When it comes to cancer, to confirm this inherited predisposition to develop cancer. but also genetics can give us information about how this condition may progress in the future. And this can give us really helpful information on how to treat this disease or how to manage this disease. If we know that there's this particularly genetic condition within the family, then we can give, this can be helpful information to make decisions such as pregnancies. Some people decide to make decisions prior to a pregnancy to help prevent pass on these genetic alterations to their children. But also having this information prior to it can help them in many ways. Only the knowing that there's this increased risk of cancer within the family can be really important in other family members. And just a really basic overview of what genetics is. We tell our patients that our DNA is that what we inherit from our parents, but also we pass on to our children. And therefore, that has all the information on how we look like, but it also has information on how our body has to function. So this genetic information that we inherit from our parents is present in every cell in our body. So it's present in our cells of our skin, it's present in our cells of heart. So if we take a look into any of our cells, let's say a blood cell, and we take a look at it in the microscope, then we see that this genetic information is organized in different chromosomes. And each of us, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. And we talk about pairs because we inherit one from the mother and one from the father. That's why we have like our mother and have like our father. And in these pairs of chromosomes, we have our genes. And these genes are like the pieces of DNA that has these instructions for how our body has to function. So we know that there are some genes that are related to cancer. So they have these instructions on how our cells have to grow, or how or when they should divide, or when these cells, how long they need to live. So in that sense, if any of these genes that are related to cancer has one genetic alteration, this can give us an increased risk of developing cancer. But we'll take a look at it more in detail in a bit. One common question that we have in clinics, I have many patients asking, well, is my cancer genetic? And the answer is always, well, yes, your cancer is genetic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your cancer is hereditary. So we explain that cancer is genetic because all cancers are caused because of genetic alterations within our cells. So cancer happens when our cells grow and divide in an uncontrolled way, and therefore there's genetic alterations in it. But not all of them are hereditary. In fact, most of the cancers are not hereditary. They are what we call somatic cancers. And these somatic cancers, these genetic alterations in our cancer, we've not been born with. At one stage in our lifetime, something happened in our DNA. Well, our cells are constantly growing and dividing. So in this division, something happened that changed our DNA and therefore led to this alteration. And we don't really know what happened. This can be caused due to many factors. We always talk about environmental factors. This can be caused due to diet, tobacco, or some other factors that we don't know. But the thing we know is that it's not hereditary. There are, however, there's a small percentage of families that we say is about only 5 to 10% of cancer cases that are hereditary. And therefore, we know that in these patients, they have been born with one genetic alteration that is given them an increased risk of developing cancer compared to the rest of the population. And in this sense, for me, the word predisposition is a really important word when it comes to cancer genetics. So people who are born with one genetic alteration in these cancer-related genes, they have a predisposition to develop cancer, but that doesn't mean that they will develop cancer. In fact, there are people that have one genetic alteration that will develop cancer, and some other person with the exact same genetic alteration that won't. So carrying this alteration means that their lifetime risk of developing cancer is increased compared to the rest of the population. And I've included here, for example, the risk towards developing breast cancer. In the video, in Andy's videos, he talks about one gene. It was the BRCA2 gene. So this gene, all of us, we have it. So I have this gene, and Andy has it as well. People who have this gene, or that have no alteration, they can also develop cancer. They can also develop, women can also develop breast cancer, but the risk is what we say is population risk. If they have one alteration in this BRCA2 gene, then their risk is significantly increased compared to the rest of the population. And therefore, is when we talk about additional screening, we talk about preventative measures and different type of cancer management for these patients. So in this sense, there are multiple cancer predisposition syndromes, and it's not only the gene BRCA1 or BRCA2 that we know when it's inherited, it can lead to an increased risk of breast and ovarian cancer and also prostate cancer in men. But there are some other genetic conditions. I've included here Lynch syndrome because it's also one of the most common cancer predisposition syndrome. This condition can be caused due to alteration in different genes. So depending on which gene the alteration is found, then we are talking about slightly different risks. But mainly this syndrome is related to colorectal cancer, also endometrial, ovarian, and prostate cancer. So people who have one alteration in any of those genes, they present with what we call Lynch syndrome. Therefore, they are at an increased risk of developing any of the cancers that we mentioned before. We are talking about this increased risk, and therefore, because we know that these people have a higher risk compared to the rest of the population, then their recommendations are different, and therefore additional screening is also recommended for these patients. For patients that we know they carry one genetic alteration that is related to cancer, sometimes in some cases there's some targeted treatment, and also it's important to discuss with them that there are some preventative measures. As for example, when it comes to breast cancers, we know that women have one alteration in BRCA1 or BRCA2. They can discuss risk-reducing surgery, as in removing their breast, because we know that women presented with this genetic alterations, their risk, their cancer is more aggressive, and also is more likely that it can happen again. When it comes to genes, there's different types of inheritance. Those genes that are related to cancer, most of them, they have what we call an autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance. So if there's one parent that presents with one alteration in any of those genes, the chances of their children to inherit this alteration are 50% chance. So if we know that a person has Lynch syndrome, the risk for each of their children to have Lynch syndrome as well is a 50% chance. I've included here some tables on risk on prostate cancer. So prostate cancer is the most common cancer in men in the UK, as in 1 in 8 men will develop this type of cancer in any stage in their lifetime. We know, unfortunately, men with African or African Caribbean heritage are at an increased risk, as in 1 in 4 men with this heritage will develop prostate cancer. So We know that ethnicity is a risk factor, but also family history can increase the risk of developing prostate cancer. As in, if one of your first degree relative, as in brother or father, has also been affected with prostate cancer, your baseline risk can increase up to 3 times higher. If in these families that we know there are several family members affected with prostate cancer, they might be eligible for genetic testing, and if one genetic alteration is found, for example, in BRCA2, then we can pinpoint this risk and we can talk about this risk more accurately for other family members. As we know, people with a BRCA2 alteration, they are at a higher risk of developing this condition. But also, as we were saying before, people who have Lynch syndrome, they also have a higher risk of developing this type of cancer. When it comes to assessing how likely is that our patient's cancer is hereditary, we take into account 3 factors mainly. So one of them is family history, as we were discussing. So if there are several family members affected within the family across different generations, and with a specific type of cancer, also if this cancer has been presented at a earlier stage in life. So for example, we would suspect more of a hereditary type of cancer in someone presenting with cancer at the age of 30 or 40 than someone presenting at the age of 80. But also some clinical characteristic of all the diagnosis can be an indicator of a hereditary type of cancer. So those cancers that are caused due to an inherited factor tend to be a bit more aggressive. Such as, for example, bilateral type of cancer, as in breast or lung cancer. And we know in breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer tumors, they are more aggressive, and therefore they are more likely to be caused due to an inherited factor compared to other type of tumors. Also, we know that there are some types of cancer that they normally can present within the family. So we were discussing before breast and ovarian cancer and prostate cancer being linked to this BRCA2 genetics alteration. But we know some other type of cancers that there can also be some specific links between them. If you suspect of one hereditary cancer in your patient, or you think that your patient can benefit from a genetic assessment, then we would be grateful if you could refer patients to us. It's really, you can really contact us via email or post. I've included some details here, but if at the end of the presentation you would like to have more information on how to refer a patient, then I'm happy to help you with that. In the referral, it's helpful for us to have some information on the patient diagnosis, and also when this patient presented, at what age he presented with the cancer, and any type of relevant information that you think it might be helpful for genetics, such as, for example, the patient has been adopted or not. He's not able to have any information on his family history, or if there's history of environmental factors, and it would be helpful for us to have this information in advance. And as we were saying before, in genetics, we not only assess the individual, we see the whole family. So for our appointments, we ask our patients to fill in some family history questionnaire. So we have all the details from his family or from the diagnosis from their families, and that can help us give a better assessment. So with the referral, we ask patients to complete this questionnaire and return it to us. And once the family history questionnaire is returned, and we prepare the pedigree, which is a really helpful tool for us in genetics, because it really helps us spot any patterns or can give us indication of what's going on within the family. And for example, here I included on family that we could suspect there could be a genetic factor running within the family, putting some other family members at risk and therefore explaining the cancer diagnosis. So for example, our proband here, she's a breast cancer patient diagnosed at the age of 61. Based on purely this diagnosis, our patient, she wouldn't meet criteria for genetic testing. But then if we take a look at the mom side of the family, there are several family members affected with this type of cancer. Also, her mom, her first degree relative being affected with the same type of cancer at a similar age can give us some indicators on hereditary type of cancer. We can see that there's 4 different generations affected with cancer, and also the link between ovarian, prostate, and breast cancer, especially ovarian cancer, which is not a very common cancer within the population. And also we can see that there's 1 family member affected with cancer at the age of 39, which is an earlier age than most cancer diagnoses. But for example, here we can, our patient has been referred with no family history of breast cancer. However, she was diagnosed at the age of 38, which is not very common and can sort of set the alarms on if there's something that has put her at a high risk of developing breast cancer. Also, there's no family history of breast cancer, but if we take a look at both sides of the family separately, on her mom's side of the family, there's no history of cancer, and on her dad's side of the family, there's also no history of cancer. But there's no information on women on that side that is informative. We only have men on her dad generation that are alive. So even if there was one inherited factor that could cause breast cancer diagnosis within her family, we wouldn't know because her family history is not informative. And as the last case, this is one common case families are sometimes referred to our department. This is our patient that has been diagnosed with prostate cancer at the age of 72. He's really concerned because he has family history of cancer on both sides of the family. And this is something that really concerns our patients when it comes to hereditary cancer. In genetics, we try to explain that it's not more concerning to have both sides of the family affected with cancer than having one side of the family with a lot of family members affected, as in, therefore, that would be a greater indicator that some genetic alteration is running within that side of the family. So taking a look at this pedigree, we do see that on her mom's side of the family, there are 2 family members affected with cancer. Prostate and colon cancer, they are one of the most common cancer within the population. And we see that there's one intervening relative as her mom or the whole generation that has not been affected with cancer. And both ages of diagnosis are quite late. So this side of the family wouldn't be particularly suggestive of hereditary type of cancer. And if we take a look at the that side of the family, it's quite same. Both, well, the family member that was affected with prostate cancer was at a later stage in life, died of old age. And then we have lung cancer, which sometimes can be, well, most times, this can be explained by environmental factors. So as in this particular case, our patient is not eligible for genetic testing, but his concern is understandable. And if there's any doubt that one patient can present with hereditary type of cancer and any doubt, it would be helpful to refer him. and to assess it just in case if when further appointment is needed, then this patient would be seen in genetics. But going back to somatic cancer, as I say, most cancers that are not hereditary, they are due to this genetic alterations that are only present in the tumor, and therefore we've not been born with. But studying these changes, these genetic changes in the tumor, is also really important when it comes to the patient cancer management, as it can help it can help the consultant take decision on how this cancer should be managed, or even of being able to offer them a specific type of treatments. And when it comes to this specific type of treatments, is what we call personalized medicine, as in this is knowing, if we know what is happening within the tumor and we have more information on why cancer is happening, we can offer a specific type or a targeted treatment for that specific type of cancer, that specific type of patient. And personalized medicine, especially in cancer, is moving towards that field, towards being able to offer patients one treatment that we know it works in him. In order to be able to offer this type of targeted treatment, we have to learn a lot about tumor biology, and we have to know why cancer happens, or why this specific type of treatment happens in one person and not in the other. And therefore a lot of research is needed, and unfortunately in this research there's not enough representation of people with with a non-white ethnic background, and we need to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. We need to make sure that we can be able to provide everyone with these targeted treatments in the future. So it's important to offer this, to let know about clinical trials and to have representation of all communities in genomics studies. And we are talking about how this is the treatment for the future, but it's not so much for the future, it's also for the present. So for example, recently, before summer, this type of treatment has been approved. A lot of you might have heard about this, about PARP inhibitors. So this type of treatment is one targeted treatment for those cancer patients that have one alteration in the genes BRCA1 or BRCA2. So patients, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer patients that have one alteration in any of those genes, we know that they are more susceptible to work this type of medication on them. When it comes to genetic testing, we can talk about somatic testing, as in testing the tumor, or germline testing, which is typically a blood test. Somatic testing, it is usually organized, it's usually mainstreamed. And if an alteration is found in the tumor, this could either be because it's specific to the tumor and it's nowhere else within the body, or it could either be that it's inherited. So if it's inherited, then this alteration would be present in the tumor, but it would be present in the rest of the cells. So for example, this was the case of Andy that we saw in the video before. He was first tested in his tumor, and this alteration in BRCA2 was found, and therefore he was referred for germline testing. So those patients who are found to have these genetic alterations in their tumor, they should be referred to clinical genetics to see whether this alteration is inherited, because this could have implication in all the family members. In genetics, we normally do germline testing, and for germline testing in cancer, there are two different types of testings. One is the diagnostic testing, so that's when our patient, it's normally done in patients who are affected with cancer or they are symptomatic. And there are 3 different types of results. First result is that alteration is found in her sample. So if an alteration is found in the sample, then this would kind of explain us why they develop cancer. And this can also have implication in their cancer management, but also in their family members. So if an alteration is found, then each of the first degree relatives, as in for example, children or siblings, they are at a 50% chance of having this alteration as well. Third type of result is a negative result. So that means that we check out those genes that we know are related to their type of cancer, and no alteration has been found in those genes. So therefore, this type of result reduces the risk of their cancer being hereditary. However, we cannot completely rule out the possibility of the cancer being hereditary, as some other genes that we don't know and we haven't tested can be the cause of the cancer. And then there's a third type of result that is not a common result, but we still see every now and then in genetics, and it's what we call VUS, a variant of unknown significance. So this type of result is that in those genes that we know are related to that type of cancer, we found one genetic change. And all of us, we have thousands of these changes in our genes, because that's what makes us different one to the other. And most of these changes, they are good changes, but some of them, they are what we call alterations, and those alterations already give us an increased risk of cancer. So when we come across this type of result with a VUS result, we we need more information in order to say if it's an alteration or if it's a good change. So it's sort of wait and see if this can have clinical implications or not. Apart from diagnostic testing, then we also have predictive testing, which is for those individuals that are normally not affected and not symptomatic, and that's because one alteration has been found within the family and they know they are at risk of inheriting this alteration. So the results on this testing are more straightforward. We can either have a positive result saying that the person has inherited the familial alteration, and therefore they are at this familial increased risk of developing cancer. And also we have the negative result, meaning that they have not inherited the alteration. And in this case, we can say that we know why the cancer happened within the family. They do not carry this alteration, and therefore the risk of developing cancer is similar to the rest of the population. Before deciding to do genetic testing or not is sort of like a lifetime decision. Once you know your genetic status, once you know you carry one genetic alteration, then you can never not know. So it's really important for us to, for our patients, to make this decision when they are sure about it, and to make this decision knowing about all the implications it can have. It is totally a personal decision because not everybody wishes to know. And also it's important for us to discuss with them that people who carry that alteration, there's specific healthcare recommendations to be offered. So for example, for breast cancer patients, it's important to discuss about risk reducing surgery. Also, the waiting time for results can be extremely stressful for patients, and especially now that we are dealing with some delays with the lab. So it's important to discuss this with the patient.
And then I've got another question from Chris, and he's asked, for genetic screening and testing, is there a simple flow chart to follow to identify who would be should be put forward or should not be put forward for genetic?
Right. So in terms for consultants that want to refer our patients to to our service. If they have any doubt, then they can just refer the patient with the family history completed. If they do not meet criteria or no further assessment is needed, then after reviewing this, they would receive a letter, not with the appointment, saying, well, we review your case and we are not, no further indication is needed.
I know a few years ago there was some sort of some infographics with, you know, you've got 2 or 3 family members affected, they're young and so on, that would highlight people. Jo, have you got?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of resources that are available centrally, but that is something we can take back and just see if we can produce something that can be pinned up in a clinic room and things like that. I know we were talking about that just earlier on, actually, but to steal one of Julian Barwell's sort of analogies of what he looks at, he says generally just consider dusty bin. So the 3-2-1 analogy of 3 family members across 2 generations, 1 under 50, should spark a bit of a concern to raise and refer through to genetics in that sense.
And will you share your slides so I can circulate them after? Thank you. That was brilliant, Maria.
Thank you, Annette.
Jo.
I am just trying to get to my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Is that working? Have I got the right screen? I've not got my notes up on there.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're all right with about 10-15 minutes?
I
So
will try and whittle
Eddie
through.
10-15 minutes.
I will try and whittle through. And actually, as we said, we can share the slides afterwards, so people can fire questions afterwards if they so wish to. So we've already done introduction, so I won't go into all of that. Just to sort of show this slide here. So following the National 100,000 Genomes project, there's been a shift towards personalised medicine, and NHS England launched the Genomic Medicine Service in October 2018, along with 2 national genomic test directories that set out the levels of commissioned genomic testing available for different rare diseases and for cancers. So there's one for rare disease and one for cancers. They also, at this time, they also commissioned 7 genomic laboratory hubs, also known as GLHs, and 7 genomic medicine service alliances, known as GMSAs. So there's lots of acronyms that we have to try and remember to explain to everybody along the way. And these were set up to support the implementation of the genomic test directories and to ensure that all eligible patients are able to access appropriate genomic tests, and the personalised treatment and research opportunities that brings are offered to them. So in the East Midlands and East of England, you see from this map here, that actually forms the East Genomics region that we cover, which includes 29 NHS trusts and has a population of 11 million. So after a successful transformation bid, we started something called the United Against Prostate Cancer project, so UAPC for short. And the project aimed to use a holistic and collaborative approach to tackle health inequalities in relation to prostate cancer across the East GMSA, working with clinical and scientific colleagues, stakeholder partnerships, and with community champions to improve the care of men and support for their families, particularly those within a higher risk group and individuals with a relevant family history and or of African Caribbean heritage. And obviously Maria's gone into some further detail about that. So she also mentioned about the PARP inhibitor approval. So when we first set up the project, it was pending PARP approval. That's a bit of a too many penguins and pick up a penguin things in there. So pending PARP approval, we agreed on the initial testing criteria and the objectives of the pilot, and that's all illustrated in the slide. So I won't go through all of that, but you'll be able to have a look at those at your leisure. The slide's not moving on. And here, just looking at why we chose prostate cancer. So the stats speak for themselves, really. And again, Maria's sort of picked up on some of those statistics in terms of the higher risk groups and those with a family history. And the challenge here is to identify those at a higher risk of aggressive disease. One of the first things we did was, in collaboration with Prostate Cancer UK, was to define prostate cancer terms into a genomic glossary, and also building relationships and resources for the project legacy. So pleasing to pick up on some of the suggestions there, and what we will do is make sure that all of these resources are available via our website, so people can be signposted to those. And then also building trust in the community through stakeholder collaborations and numerous outreach events. So again, Maria's already picked up on some of this in terms of the risk. So as stated, men of African heritage are at a higher risk of developing prostate cancer, and so this was a particular area of focus for our outreach. We were privileged to have Dr. Bola Awolabi as a guest speaker at one of our community domino events that we hosted in Nottingham, along with the NHS England comms team. And subsequently, this raised quite a sort of a high impact social media activity. There was also a subsequent blog from Professor Dame Sue Hill, who's our Chief Scientific Officer, and Lindsay Thompson, who is one of the founding members of Be Me Against Cancer charity based in Nottingham. And our community champions, who are well respected in their communities, feature in this video, and there's a link to the video there if people want to have a look at that at a later stage as well. So this slide, it's quite busy, but I think it really emphasises the levels of creative engagement we have undertaken to date across the region, with peer patient champions being a key feature of that, and shown on there. You might see a few familiar faces that are on this call too. And what we've been able to do is use the use of arts as a creative way to engage with different communities as well. Even a tweet from Sir Lenny Henry to advocate an event that we were doing, and engagement with Lord Mayors and esteemed dignitaries along the way too. So this is the tumour pathway. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there was two elements to it, one of it being the community outreach and one of it being the testing side of things. So this is the tumour pathway. We took academic advice from international prostate cancer expert, Professor Colin Cooper at the University of East Anglia, and used positive and negative controls up front to validate the pathway. And then we were able to start putting patients through this particular pathway. So these are the patients who took part in the pilot that we have undertaken to get this pathway established. And this was all prior to NICE approval of the PARP inhibitors. And it demonstrates the figures there that we've achieved there. And it even demonstrates where we've had some positive germline findings that have come about, which sadly obviously resulted in you know, Andy resulted in sort of Andy's case, and also the sharing of his story, which is, as you've seen earlier, a very powerful one. So as we said, it's incredibly moving, and unfortunately Andy's passed away, but what we are extremely grateful for is his testimony, and the ability to be able to use this as an important message in the future for other people to take note of. So one of the project objectives was to establish the genomic testing for prostate on the test directory. So when we first embarked on this project, it wasn't included. And pleasingly, this has now been included since the 2022 revision, along with the NICE approval of the PARP inhibitors treatment. And since then, since the inclusion in the test directory and the PARP inhibitor improvement, we've seen an increase in patients that have been referred into the pathway, and now we're in a situation where we're looking at how we scope the demand versus capacity. So we've already talked about turnaround times. Obviously, prostate cancer is one of many tests within the test directory, so it's looking at how we can work with our laboratory partners to make sure that we can increase the uptake and the capacity within the laboratories to accommodate that. So just in terms of next steps, we're anchoring on the Commonwealth Games legacy actually with the West Midlands. So we've done this project across the East Midlands, but we've sparked off some engagement with Professor Martin Levermore, who's pictured just here, and he's very keen, and we've shared our framework with him, and we're looking at how, in his terms, what we can do is create a bit of a golden corridor. So certainly across the West Midlands, they also have a higher population population of men from African heritage. So they are keen to emulate the approach that we've taken there. And we're also supporting actor Colin McFarlane, I can't pronounce his name, and Prostate Cancer UK in their most recent campaigns as well. We're continuing our work as part of a wider portfolio of developing resources and embedding genomics into mainstream healthcare. And that involves working with our stakeholder partners, the laboratories, and making sure that we embed this fully as part of our business as usual priorities. So this is just acknowledging the power of community leadership and the importance of developing trust. And this just highlights a couple of marvellous ladies that, again, who have sadly lost their lives now, both to cancers, but who were champions in their own community. And we've had the privilege of working with them over many years to do some true collaboration work with them, and they are greatly missed. And again, it's just a bit of a storyboard of sort of some of the activities that we've done and we've mentioned. The collaboration with esteemed dignitaries, Lord Mayor, Professor Bola Owolabi. There are many different sort of elements to this as well, including books that have just been launched through the UHL consultants, and even books to educate young children in schools that is due to be launched, I believe, early next year. So it just gives a little bit more of a flavour of the activities that we've been involved in, and a whole list of people that we would like to thank in the work that we've done so far. So that is it from me, just to emphasise what the United Against Prostate Cancer is and what we are looking to do for the future and how we can continue that fabulous work that's happened. So I will now hand over.
That's great, Jo. Has anybody got any quick questions for Jo? No? So I'd like to move on to Eddie, who's living with prostate cancer and has been through the UAPC project as a user.
Okay, so I think Ian's going to drive this for me, but you know, thinking about what Maria and Jo have been saying, definitely you're going to hear a second video from another middle-aged white man, and you know, the ethnicity question is something that I'm very much aware of as part of the PPV. You know, Chris Hind and I are really trying to push the EDI agenda quite robustly, just to try and get that equality of access, diversity, inclusiveness in there, because it's quite clear Black ethnicities are really at greater risk of prostate cancer. So I'm very much a champion of getting that in there too.
I think that the first thing you wanted to do, Eddie, was the video, wasn't it? So should we go straight in with that? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's easiest, and it dovetails nicely with the little article interview that Annette and I did for the newsletter. So please do that, Ian, and then I'll come back to an update.
Diagnosis was almost accidental. I went to the GP after COVID for a health check and said, you know, while you're doing my blood pressure, which is normal, you've taken blood for lipids, etc., could you do a urine test? And it was full of glucose. So they said, you'll need to come back for an HbA1c. And I said, okay, I'd like to have a PSA test at the same time. And it was, ooh, you're going to have to talk to the GP first. So talk to the GP, goes through the wrist, did the digital rectal examination, said it's mildly swollen prostate. I will do a test for you. And then he phoned me back a couple of days later, and it was 600. Yes, 600 nanograms per mil or micrograms per litre, whatever measure you take, 600. I thought, you've got the decimal point in the wrong place. So they repeated it, and within 2 weeks it had gone above 700. So I got a call I was put in the 2 weeks programme and told I probably had metastatic stage 4 prostate cancer. I said, but I feel fine. Well, we'll do the tests anyway. So bone scans, CT scans came back and again confirmed widespread bone metastases and lymph node involvement. So here's me, like the case Julian was describing, fitting well, playing golf, you know, going to the gym. And, you know, so my first comment is, why isn't there a screening program for this, right? I know the biopsies are difficult to take, but I've had biopsies taken, and apart from a bit of discomfort in the day and an infection that followed that was treated very quickly, it's actually not that bad. And then we go to treatment. So immediately following that diagnosis, I was giving some very short-term hormone deprivation therapies, a thing called bicalutamide, first in class treatment. And that was used as a cover for me then getting a long-acting 3-monthly injection. Now, why I'm telling you this is that towards the end of that 3 months after they've taken me off that cover, we found that the PSA was rising again. So I said to my oncologist, look, this is coming back up again. I think the long-acting isn't as long-acting as it should be. So he said, okay, I'll put you on a second-generation androgen deprivation therapy called enzalutamide. Now, that worked brilliantly. So in the last 5 months since my initial diagnosis, the level of PSA has fallen by 99%. It's gone from that peak of 700 to around about 5 now. And the follow-up bone scan has shown that the density of signal has gone down in existing METs, and there's no new METs. So actually, that treatment has been very, very effective. So then the third aspect I'd like to briefly mention is genetics. And it's all back to Julian and Dick again. The PPV panel that I joined in September, we met face-to-face for the first time in September. And at that meeting, I met Gemma Gunn and Joe Lowry and United Against Prostate Cancer. So from talking to them, I got enrolled in the study that Julian mentioned to look at somatic DNA. So the somatic DNA has been looked at, and 16 genes are normal, including BRCA1, BRCA2. Some greatly relieved. But something else was done using a thing called TSO500, and that spotted a change in a gene called BRAF. So I've got a mutation in BRAF, G469A, which is seen in probably about 1% or so of prostate cancer, so it's relatively rare. But I think that explains why I may have metastatic disease with very few symptoms. So it's been quite an aggressive disease, I guess, but I think it's down to this mutation. Now, what's exciting, again, as Julian says, BRAF is something that's been targeted with some precision medicines, particularly in lung and melanoma, and it has good effect, but it's not that durable. So one of the challenges is getting a durable response with some of these things. But most exciting for me is the fact that some of these studies are beginning to use immunotherapies as well. So although I was told initially that my cancer was incurable, and that's the dogma, the number surviving, as Julian pointed out, is now about 50% over 5 years. That's gone up dramatically in 2 or 3 years from 20% and less. And I think that number will increase because we can start to look at cures with immunotherapies and combination therapies. So I'm putting my hand way, way up to say, yes, I want to be involved in those studies that will combine treatments against BRAF and with immunotherapies to try and cure my cancer. And on that front, again, Julian put me in touch with the Royal Marsden, Professor Eels there, and she has been excellent in getting me involved in some of their studies. I'll be involved in Barcode because I don't qualify for the diagnostic aspects of the work she's doing. So somatic sequencing, absolutely, Julian. Targeted treatments, absolutely, Julian. Living with cancer, absolutely, Julian. I will die with it, but not from it. So thank you for your attention.
Right, so that was me being very optimistic, but I remain optimistic, of course. And as you'll see from the article, a few things have happened since then. My PSA level has started to rebound a little. It's crept up to just below 20 now. So there's clearly some tumour resistance there. So the durability of enzalutamide has not been as great as maybe some other stage 4 patients have seen. But that said, you know, my bone scans, I've now had a third bone scan and a repeat CT, and both of those are showing considerable. Oh, thanks, Ian. Yeah, if you can pop up that third slide, that would be great. So both my third bone scan and my second CT scan are showing, you know, that particularly lymph node involvement is quite a bit diminished, which is fantastic news. At the same time, the amount of staining in bones is going down, and again, there's no new foci of disease. So the PSA is an indicator of some rebound is there, but the overall disease, the disseminated disease, is looking as it's at least stable, if not diminishing. So the third bullet point there is that that initial referral to Royal Marsden is taking a few months to happen, but in fact, I'm now out from Ros Eel's studies to much more interesting studies being run by Professor Johan de Bono. Why is that exciting? Well, de Bono recently published that he'd been able to cure or get an extremely durable response of androgen deprivation therapy resistant metastatic prostate cancer with a chemokine receptor inhibitor. And he's talking about curing people. So I think that's very exciting. In the same vein, there's been a couple or three reports of cure of, as Andy says, and I was told, incurable metastatic prostate cancer with the things that you know, Maria and Joe and I have mentioned, and Julian, immunotherapies and PARP inhibitors. So that's really quite exciting, although those two cases or three cases were associated with BRCA2 or MSI, microsatellite instability mutations. You know, the other exciting thing is I'm currently being consented for a study being run out of Addenbrooke's, which is a thing called Tropion, which is using a new therapy, an antibody-directed chemotherapy, where you have the chemotherapeutic agent conjugated to a monoclonal antibody that targets specifically to cells expressing an antigen called TROP2. If I get through screening there, then I hope to start that, I'd expect in the new year. So that for me is very exciting. Then on top of that, of course, this BRAF mutation that I talk about in the video and in the article with Annette, G489A, there's actually been some reports of a durable response when people are treated with both a BRAF inhibitor, the BRAFinib, and a MEK inhibitor in lung cancer. So for me, as you can see, second last bullet point, there are lots of options in addition to a standard of care, which is, you know, what I call 20th century treatments, you know, the systemic docetaxel, carbitaxel, and also, you know, the additional therapies available are targeted radiotherapies, which are really aimed at bone and specific antigens and prostate cancer cells. So again, lots of options. And Andy, it's a sad story because he was maybe just 6 years too soon in his diagnosis. I think my diagnosis, I'm living in what I'd like to think is the beginning of a golden age of treatments for metastatic disease, not just in prostate cancer, but in other cancers. So, as I've been told several times, including prostate specialists, they're saying, see you in 10 years' time. So, I'm feeling very, very positive. And in that vein, I want to provide some evidence, which is in my last slide, Ian. So this is me, top left, very wet Lake District. Bottom left, winning a trophy at golf. Middle one is walking the dogs and feeling great. Bottom right is any trip to Lake District, people know, is incomplete without a visit to the world famous Pencil Museum. So that's a highlight of my autumn so far. And then, of course, many of you will know Dick Sanford. And Dick and I went round to one of his mates and stole a bunch of logs while the mate was on holiday. So this deep fake photograph at the top is Dick and I in our van nicking an enormous log from his neighbour. So I'm keeping up with woodland activities as well, splitting logs and keeping the fire stoked. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their attention as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eddie. That was brilliant. It's great to hear your journey, hear about your life, and hear how well your treatment's been going. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Eddie, for your wonderful sharing of your life. Thank you, Joe and Maria also.